A faltering economic recovery and setbacks in globalization. Can the BRICS still serve as the voice of emerging markets and an engine of global growth? The BRICS countries are already about the same economic size as the G7, but can they ever rival the G7 in terms of global influence? Months-long standoff between China and India in the border area. Will divergence like this overshadow the agenda of the BRICS member states? China proposed the concept of expansion in BRICS Plus. Will the paradigm inject fresh momentum in the next chapter of the BRICS?
The BRICS summit opens today in the Chinese coastal city of Xiamen. With its influence growing during the past decade, BRICS is seeking to expand its role in global governance and the world economic order and to strengthen multilateral trade with a greater number of emerging economies. What further potential for cooperation can be tapped in the coming decade? Can BRICS Plus provide an opportunity and platform for other economies to grow together? And what alternative can BRICS continue to offer to the world of a rising anti-globalization, protectionism, populism, and isolationism? To discuss the many issues related to the BRICS mechanism and the world economic order, I'm pleased to be joined here in the studio by Rong Ying, Vice President of the China Institute of International Studies, and He Weiwen, Senior Fellow at the Chongyang Institute of Financial Studies, Renmin University of China. We shall also be talking to Robert Kapp, Director of the Economist Corporate Network, through satellite. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Well, there are good days and bad days about the BRICS. Let's first of all take a look at the golden decade that we ushered in since 2006, when the first meeting of foreign ministers of 4 major economies, and not including South Africa, was first held in a Russian city, Yekaterinburg. It's difficult to pronounce the Russian name. But what do you think are the most remarkable achievements that we were able to make so that the glitter of the golden BRICS could impress the world that follows the development very closely?
I think there are 2 aspects. First, the growing weight of BRICS countries in the world economy and the global governance. Because for the past 10 years, the share of BRICS countries' GDP in the global total grew from 12% to 23%, which is quite remarkable. And also, it has pursued a way of cooperation on the basis of mutual respect, inclusive, and seeking for benefits for all. So that is the good way for cooperation among new emerging and developing countries. Also good for world cooperation.
Well, the principle of a consensus building is, of course, the core part of the charter, if any, that all the 5 member states of BRICS have been able to generate. Other than that, what do you think should be copied and all serve to inspire the rest of the world to fine-tune the seriously flawed G7, which used to be the dominant economic force on the world stage?
I think the BRICS mechanism, cooperation mechanism, has played a role in the past decade in a way that, first of all, I think give and encouragement or inspire the other developing countries that we developing countries, in spite the difficulties, and that by cooperating each other, they will be able to make a difference for themselves, but more importantly for the global governance and global economic governance. I think this is very much true at the very beginning, the first few years when the idea came into existence, and there are some doubts, and there are also some sort of difficulties about whether they'll be able to do that. Now, I think 10 years later, while we're looking back, you find that it has become, this idea has become the reality. Now, the question, of course, as you rightly said, what would be the next step? as we have already, make this as a cooperation mechanism, and there are expectations that they are supposed to do more. The doubts remain that whether they will be able to work out their problems, so that the potentials would be, I think, greatly be put in full play.
Yes, indeed. The alleged glow of the golden BRICS has been called into question by the world media, but not by China. China is very confident about the prospects, which are very promising. Now let me go to Robert Cab for his comments on particularly highlights of the keynote presentation that President Xi Jinping delivered at the opening of the BRICS Business Forum in Xiamen. Robert, what can you tell us?
Well, based on what I know, there's all this optimism that's contained in those opening remarks, and that's, noble, and I think the goal for BRICS is something everyone can admire. There are, though, very crucial issues that was just alluded to in the preceding comments. There's actually more differences between the BRICS in terms of history and culture, social development, and certainly economic development. And China is the key here. It is bigger than all the other BRICS economies combined. So China's leadership position is undeniable, but how much it can actually pull together the disparate economies that make up BRICS is still to be found.
We are talking about how to improve the world economic governance with the leadership of the BRICS. As I said earlier, China is very confident about the collective future of BRICS, but we are not sure if other economies, particularly South Africa and Russia, would catch up to match their previous achievements when BRICS were first inaugurated in the year 2006. Now, what do you think of the confidence of China? Because every 4 months, we were told that every 4 months, the accumulative growth of China would be the total of Africa, South African economy.
Yes.
I mean, that's ridiculous for the cohesiveness of this bloc, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. That China is now so important among all the 5 BRICS countries. 10 years ago, China's total GDP accounted for 45% of the BRICS 5 countries, including South Africa. Last year, China's GDP accounted for 2/3 of BRICS 5 countries. So double the other 4 combined. And also on the other side, Russia, Brazil, and South Africa, the 3 countries have experienced serious difficulties over the past 2 years. And of course, they are back on the track of the growth, but very moderate, would be lower than the world average for the next 3 to 5 years.
And
so this is really a big problem. So, but President Xi Jinping said this afternoon that we will find out reform, innovation, catch up with the world industrial revolution, new industrial revolution with structural changes. That we can cooperate our macroeconomic policy and support each other and find out a common way to prop up our economy together.
Well, it seems Russia is among all the very economy that shows most interest in the development of BRICS as an economic bloc. And yet, Russian economy is way behind the leading economies such as China and India. At the same time, we emphasize the spirit of a level playing field, mutual respect, the spirit of equality. I mean, this spirit has left many observers puzzled and wondering aloud why we should enjoy the same rights with other underdeveloped economies.
Well, I'm not sure whether Russia is an underdeveloped economy. Possibly it's an economy that there has been potential, whose potential has been underdeveloped. All in all, we have to agree that Russia is an economy with great potential. The unfortunate thing is that it seems that particularly the past few years it has suffered great problems because of the low commodity prices. And that's why I think President Xi in his speech made it very clear we have to take certainly, be courageous to push for reform. And he cited that Chinese old saying that you need to take the bitter, the medicine, effective drug, but they tend to be very bitter. But I think the more important thing, if I can see, is that what China is proposing, at least if you look at the BRICS, the 5 countries, that we have to work together to make full use of the complementarities of themselves. This is something I think maybe might be a big issue ahead. And if you look at the overall significance, importance of BRICS, it is growing very fast. But within themselves, there are huge disparity, and that gap is growing. And how to make sure that these 5 countries can work together by fully giving up their potential, this is a big problem. I think there are some new agreement or new ideas coming up. They put them in a one sort of global value chain is one, and then the others better coordinate the policies at the micro level, and also work together. For example, like e-commerce is a new area, which I think a lot of people believe that can be an area that all the 5 countries can work together. That's why, as the conference, the mainland said that we need to have a stronger partnership so that we can have a bright future.
Hopefully, the skeptical global audience could somehow understand your philosophical interpretations about the complementarity concerning the economic diversity within the BRICS bloc. Let me go to Robert. Hello, Robert. What do you think of the popular jokes shared by netizens in their millions here on the internet, here in mainland China? They call Russia a gas station and Brazil a coffee shop. Now,
right.
I would not.
It looks like it's not only foreigners who are skeptical then.
So what do you think of the...
Well, indeed, that...
Yes, go ahead, Robert.
Well, yes. To your point and to the point of the netizens, they are perhaps a bit uncharitable in various ways. But with Russia in particular, it really does stand out as an economy that has been ruled in a manner that goes back over a century to almost a Stalinist period. Brazil has gone through its own set of reforms. It, compared to the 1970s, has really transformed itself. It has political instability, but it has done a lot. India has done a lot. South Africa has had interesting transformations. It's currently ruled by a leader who is not very well regarded even in his own country. But anyway, I think there is this potential for synergy, undeniably. All of these countries rely on China. So that's really the role that China could play, perhaps, in just encouraging them to do more. But it will take quite an effort. I think it's difficult to do it in terms of a common platform. China will probably have to go individually to each of the other BRICS members and try to help them foster the sort of reform that China has successfully undertaken in terms of economic development.
That's no easy job, of course. For example, reindustrialization, even for America, for the United States of America, that could be a very thorny issue for the presidency of Donald Trump.
Right.
Now, South Africa is called a rainbow country that may have projected the overtones of economic diversity and cultural diversity. Having said this, what about the nation of BRICS? Given what we have discussed a few minutes earlier, that Russia and South Africa are way behind the velocity of the economic growth, such as China and India, 5+5 is a novel idea. Other than the 5 BRICS members, we also have 5 other observer states who are invited to attend the opening ceremony of this 9th BRICS summit in the coastal city of Xiamen. In this way, do you think this is highly symbolic about the enlargement of the representation, although we do have the symbol of G20 that promises to replace G7 in the wake of the devastating financial crisis back in the year 2008?
I think there are 2 aspects. First, the expansion of BRICS Plus. Now we have 5 new guests, but that does not mean that BRICS will have 5 new members or these 5 new members, not necessary, because Egypt is now the host of Arab Union. Guinea this year is the presidency of African Union. So there are some special cases. I think the specific countries to be included remains to be seen. And to my personal idea, all the other 5 developing countries within G20, Mexico, Argentina, Turkey, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, and Indonesia should be included.
Without Nigeria, which is the largest economy in Africa.
Nigeria and Egypt. Both countries have GDPs larger than South Africa already. So I think if we keep expanding, if we include Thailand again, so 5 plus 8, then the total share of GDP as the world total GDP would be over 50%. It would be 29%. And the contributions to the world GDP growth would be 53%. So larger than the other countries' contribution combined.
Small in size, the Thai economy may, however, present the silver lining other than the golden glow of BRICS, because it's called a smile country due to its belief of Buddhism. Having said this, for the summit, a consensus was reached to support the multilateral trading system and oppose protectionism in trade, investment, and finance. Come on, we were discussing, for example, the anti-dumping and anti-subsidy investigations launched by Western economies against most of the emerging markets. How come the relationship within BRICS bloc, the BRICS bloc, could also be a very serious issue? Not all of the member states, for example, the border disputes between India and China, would also be an obstacle to overcome. What do you think of these serious challenges that we need to look at?
Yeah, the trade liberalization and the trade investment facilitation, all these issues in the context of the anti-globalization, protectionism are, I think, very serious issues, not only for the developing country in general, but all 5 countries in particular. I think in general, if you look at the past decades, these 5 countries have benefited from the trend of globalization, from the multilateralism, from the open regime, and they are supporters. Actually, they were supporting the multilateral trade regime. But unfortunately, because of that protectionism, some of the countries, in particular, I think here I would like to pick India has raised some issues, targeting a particular country. So you look at the bilateral trade between China and India, and China, unfortunately, has been the sort of the country that has been suffered that. So how to make sure, while the 5 countries working together to campaign the multilateralism, the trade liberalism, but in the meantime work together to solve a kind of their own problem. This is an issue, and I am happy to notice that I think at the trade ministers meeting they had reached some very important sort of agreement, which I hope believe that they would be adopted at the summit meeting, and that would send a very strong and positive signal for themselves, for the solidarity of the grouping, but more importantly also for the international community.
For the world media, I'm afraid the other most important issue is how to institutionalize further the functions and the role of BRICS. China really wants to promote the efficiency in the execution of some of the brilliant ideas and principles of BRICS. But what about the idea that we're going to have a secretariat which is in charge of all the execution itself?
Of course, if we have a secretariat, permanent secretariat, however, I just doubt whether that's feasible in a couple of years.
Over 40 agencies and institutes from mainland China have been involved in the organizational work of BRICS.
So we have some substitute for this arrangement to make it sure that all the BRICS countries and the Plus have share the common idea, share the common interest and common will to work together. First, at a global vision, we should work together to enhance the voice, interest, and representation of the new emerging and developing countries in the world governance. And secondly, we should do some very down-to-earth practical cooperation projects to bind ourselves together. The more we do, the better the institutionalization will be due.
For example, to promote the e-commerce as well as to further reduce the tariffs against each other. With that, we come to the end. We come to the end of the first part of our show about the opening of BRICS in the coastal city of Xiamen. Stay with us. We'll be back after this break. Despite the festive atmosphere of the BRICS summit in Xiamen, the detonation of a hydrogen bomb, quote unquote, by the DPRK has captured most world media headlines today. In China, this breaking news fails to steal the spotlight, though the Chinese Foreign Ministry condemns seriously and strongly the nuclear test in its official statement. What will the fury and the fire of Washington be like? Joining us in the second half of our program are again Rong Ying and Robert Cab. But first, let's take a look at this.
대륙간 탄도 로켓 장착용 수소탄 시험에서 완전 성공.
The DPRK on Sunday said it had successfully tested a hydrogen bomb that could be loaded onto a missile. The announcement came hours after a large earthquake that appeared to be man-made was detected near the DPRK's known nuclear test site, indicating that the country had indeed conducted its sixth nuclear test. According to the state broadcaster, a hydrogen bomb test ordered by leader Kim Jong-un was a perfect success and was a meaningful step in completing the country's nuclear weapons program.
Kim Jong-un
said all components of H-bomb were domestically made and all the processes ranging from the production of weapons-grade nuclear materials to precision production of components and their assembling were done on the Zhushi basis, thus enabling the country to produce powerful nuclear weapons, as many as it wants.
Japan condemned the test, and South Korean President Moon Jae-in convened Emergency Security Council talks. China's foreign ministry strongly condemned the DPRK nuclear test and stressed that the solution to denuclearization on the Korean peninsula is peaceful dialogue.
Mr. Rong, are you surprised about the detonation?
To be frank, I'm not so surprised because the nuclear test had long been expected. It has been certainly a series of provocations, or from the viewpoint of DPRK, a response to the provocations of the other side, which is the United States. I think but the fact that it happened, and it happened in such a way, was very unfortunate. And as the government of China made it very clear, we strongly opposed and condemned that. And it also condemned and opposed by the international community.
A hotline was activated between the two militaries, the South Korea and the United States, in the immediate aftermath of the nuclear test. At the same time, President Donald Trump called Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to discuss what should be done next to cope with the emerging situation. Do you believe the strategic patience is really over? And what do you think of the Chinese appeal for the due suspension? The end of the military drills on the American and South Korean side, and also the end of nuclear and missile tests on the DPRK side.
Oh yeah, I think for the U.S. administration, the Trump administration, that's made very clear the strategic patience, the strategy, so-called the strategy has been long ended. They are now pursuing a kind of a strategy called the strategic pressure and maximum pressure. Now the question is that, as the Chinese side has argued repeatedly and pleaded repeatedly that the pressure or sanctions by the international community, particularly by the UN Security Council resolution, has to come together with the efforts by dialogue. That's why, as you rightly said, the Chinese side has put forward a proposal or initiative for a kind of due suspension. In other words, the Chinese side said, look, the DPRK side should stop provocating by testing nuclear weapons, missiles, while the U.S. side should stop the large-scale military exercise, which the DPRK had long regarded as a provocation. So if we could do that, at least that virtuous cycle would be broken, and then around situation will be prepared that the dialogue could start. This is also, by the way, requested by the UN Security Council resolutions.
Pretty soon, UN Security Council will convene yet another session to discuss probably the severity of yet another round of economic sanctions against the DPRK. Let me go to Robert. Robert, can we really trust the official claim by Pyongyang that nuclear warhead has been militarized and that the success of the so-called hydrogen bomb test may be logged onto the intercontinental ballistic missile, so that the delivery of such a militarized warhead could reach the shoreline of the United States of America? And what does that mean if this claim could be accepted as true?
Well, I think the U.S. military establishment is assuming it's true. That's the safer option, obviously, to assume the worst in this case and be prepared for it. I think, unfortunately, the implications are that you have even greater risks now accumulating. We have a president in place in the United States who has very much laid down the law regarding what he sees as continued provocation from North Korea. Now, how far the U.S. will go in response will still be determined over time, but more than any other president before him, he has said he is prepared to confront North Korea militarily, and that would have dire consequences not only for the North Koreans, but surrounding countries, including China, of course.
Mr. Rong Ying, the United States seems to have ruled out the use of force in the process of denuclearization. What does that mean?
I'm not sure whether they have fully ruled out that option, because they always said all the options are on the table, which I believe that it is meant to send a signal that military option remains one, but it may not necessarily the best option, because the consequences, the costs is unbearable, and I think neither side would. And there are countries like China and others we firmly and readily opposing that option. The question, as I said, that now we have a situation that has been going from worst to worst, and simply they were losing the control. Because of that vicious circle. So where is the stopping sort of the end? That stop, as the Chinese said. I think we need to press the brake so that the two trains are in collision. If there nothing happened, and then definitely we were going to have a kind of situation where nobody wants to see. That's why we still believe that the due suspension, full suspension initiative is work.
Thank you so much, Robert and Rong Ying. In fact, many are still wondering if China does have the leverage to exercise any tangible and substantial influence on the escalation of tensions in the divided Peninsula. I'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye.